and welcome to Education USA Virtual Week. Education USA is your official source of US higher education information. This week-long webinar series brings you 10 live virtual sessions on different topics to help you prepare for study in the USA and features more than 20 expert US admissions specialists and Education USA advisors. My name is Katie Sleeman, and I'm an Education USA coordinator in Auckland, New Zealand. I have the pleasure of kicking off the Research Your Options session today. The first step to studying in the US is researching your options to find a college or university that fits your needs. You shouldn't try to match yourself to the school, but rather find the school that matches you and your priorities and long-term goals. This session is brought to you by Education USA, College of the Canyons, Creighton University, and Stony Brook University. If you are tuning in live, we encourage you to post your questions on our Slido page by going to www.sli.do and entering the session code you see at the bottom of this screen. First, I would like to introduce our US admissions experts who will be delivering the presentation. Stacy Aquero is an international admissions advisor at Stony Brook University. Stacy has over 20 years experience in international admissions and study abroad, and her passion is helping students find the right fit. Tim Honedell is the Director of International Programs for the College of the Canyons in California. He is a specialist in supporting a student's entry into the US bachelor's degree programs through the 2+2 programs. Megan Mankirian-Sten is a Director of International Enrollment at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. She has worked in international education for 10 years and traveled to more than 60 countries in that time. She enjoys working with students and families to find their place in US education. Now over to you, Tim.
Great, thank you very much. So like our wonderful host, Catherine, just explained, it's important that you find a match between you and the school. And the strategy behind that is exactly what Catherine said. You find the school that matches you. That's important, not necessarily the other way around as a priority. But how do you do that? And so we're going to look at some of those things and the reasons why you would choose any particular school to try to give yourself a way to help Education USA help you find the right school. So first of all, why even study in the United States? Well, there's a couple of good things about it. First of all, the worldwide recognition. Basically, what I tell my students is that one of the reasons why it's so important to study in the United States is because the grade that you get is the grade that you earn. So what that means to the whole world is that when you get a diploma from a US institution, that diploma means something. Lots of employers like to see that US diploma because they know that it means something. Another factor about US is that it's so large and there's so many schools to choose from that you can study anything you want to study. There's a wide range of degrees, and all of those schools are well funded and they all have great libraries and great facilities. And so you have lots of choices for top-notch resources. Another thing that's interesting about the United States is because people come to live and to study all over the world in the United States. Any campus you go to is just going to be full of people from all over the world. And remember, you're studying abroad. And the main reason for that, of course, is the US degree. But don't forget how important it is to make those lifelong connections. The personal connections and professional connections you make while studying abroad are going to serve you for the rest of your life. And you're going to live a long time after you graduate. You're going to meet a lot of people. It's going to be great. So an interesting thing that happens when you go to a US institution is when you finish, you don't have to go straight home. There are work programs where you work at a US institution, learning sort of or at least experiencing the US way of being in a corporation or a small business or anything in between, wherever it is that you decide to work after you graduate. And so don't forget what a great option it is to work after you finish your degree. Let's go to the next slide. So, like I said, there's lots of choices. There are thousands of universities to pick from in the United States. So trying to make it so that you can match a school is really hard. But finding a school that can match you is a lot easier. So let's talk about some characteristics to take a look at. First of all, in the United States, there are public and private universities. There's a lot of differences and a lot of similarities. If you think of how the schools are funded, the public schools are funded mostly by the government. The private universities are funded frequently by grants and by alumni who have been very successful after completing that school. But the degrees that you get, you have so many choices. Whether you go public or private, a lot of that depends on what you want to study, what kind of environment you want to live in, and where in the country you want to be. Because you're talking about, 2 to 4 years of your life, depending on how many times you change schools, and it can be a chance to see a lot of the US. So let's talk about the different types, because that matters. If you're like me and you want to get to work as soon as you're done with school, you're going to go to a certain kind of school. If you're really interested in research, you're going to go to a research-oriented school. And there's lots of schools of various types. If you just look at this list here, you'll notice there's some sort of terminology like pathway and transfer and things like that. Well, basically what that boils down to is that sometimes when you come to the United States to study, you don't finish at the school you started with. And we'll talk about that some more at the very end, but really the school you finish at is the school that matters. So if you go to a four-year university, you're going to finish at that four-year university. Now, there are opportunities to continue in research if you're at a research facility. And so pay attention that if that's what you want to do, that you're really finding that fit. And that's back to what Catherine said. Find the schools that fit you. All right. This is an interesting bullet here, freshman versus transfer. So some students start at a four-year school, like I said, and some students do what's called 2+2. So in the United States, there's two ways you can get a bachelor's degree. One is that you start at that four-year school as a freshman. The other one is you start as a freshman at a different school, which only covers the first 2 years. Community colleges are that type of school. Then you transfer afterwards, and you go to the school that you're going to get the degree from. Now, you can transfer all over the country from 2+2 programs. So you pay attention to what programs are available to you and what your affordability is and how great of a student you are in high school, and that'll help guide you decide whether you want to do a freshman entrance into a four-year or whether you want to do a transfer. There's other kinds of schools and opportunities also that are very common. Some students, they come for one semester. They just do that study abroad, or maybe 1 year. Some students come for vocational trades. So there's a lot of schools in the United States that teach a certain area of expertise, like medical technology. So there's both ends of the spectrum. There's research and medical technology, vocational work, and also deep research. In the United States, and we'll cover this a little bit more in the next slide too, when I go over sort of the hierarchy, there are a lot of advanced degree opportunities. Not everything is just entering as a freshman. If you already have a bachelor's degree, very often you can come to the United States and you can pursue a master's, a PhD, or a professional degree. So when we talk about professional programs, we're talking about medicine, dentistry. I know that today there happens to be someone that you're going to hear from who accepts people into medical schools, which is very rare in the United States. It's a great opportunity if that's what you want to do. A lot of pharmacy programs, occupational programs, and law, of course. All right, great. Let's move to the next slide. This slide will kind of show you visually what it looks like.
Sorry, I'm getting there.
It's okay. This slide will show you visually kind of what the US system looks like. And if you look at the blue band here, sort of towards the top, that's where you're going to be when you come to the United States. And remember, there's two ways to do it. You can go in as a freshman and then transfer to your bachelor's degree school after 2 years, or you can go straight to your 4-year school. Both of those are available. And look at the top band, because the top band is what I really want to emphasize. Because in today's world, if you are starting as a freshman, or if you already have a bachelor's degree, you should know that an advanced degree is extremely valuable. Lots of people have bachelor's degrees. Those master's degrees and those professional degrees and those doctoral degrees, those are your opportunities to really stand out after you've completed a US institution. So with that, I would like to pass it on to my colleague for the next slide, because I think that we've got more exciting things to cover that are more kind of in the details of what to do next. So here we go. Thank you, Megan.
Hey, everybody. So a lot of students, when I meet them, say, we understand that there's over 4,500 universities in the US. Where do we even start? Where do we even go to find information? Well, honestly, right now, tuning into this webinar, this is step one. Really connecting yourself with Education USA. They are going to be the ones who can really help you start exploring. And there's several ways you can connect with them. I honestly spent a lot of time on their social media pages. They're incredibly active on Facebook, as you may be watching this right now on a Facebook stream, as well as Instagram, if you're more into the Instagram part of social media. But the cool thing is you can always send them a message if you just have a quick question, and get a response back. You can attend a virtual event like this one, or any of the ones this week that will cover a lot of what we talk about today, but more in depth than what we're going to cover. Or you can set up opportunities right now to meet with their advisors one-on-one virtually. It's great that even though we're kind of in this, work from home phase, that they're still meeting with students one-on-one. So I highly, highly recommend it. And this is going to be for any type of program you're looking at in the US. They are so incredible about getting to know all the different institutions across the US and what's unique about each one. So they can help you start figuring out where that fit is and which universities may fit the needs that you're looking for. Another place you could go is US News and World Report rankings. I will say be a little bit careful with this because not everything about a university is held in their rankings. It is one thing that you could look at, but a ranking is not everything. I always tell students that the biggest thing you can get out of their rankings is by looking at their rankings by program. So for example, if you know that you want to study chemistry, go look up the top 50 schools for chemistry and use that as maybe your first 50 universities that you look at, and then go through and start looking at their other factors. You can take out the ones, if you know you want to go to a smaller college, then you can take out the big schools. Or if you know that you want to be in a certain part of the US, or if you want to be in a big city, then that can help you start going through that list and, narrowing it down a little bit. Big Future by College Board is another website that you could go to and start putting in different factors that are important to you. I just listed some of them, like maybe it's the size of a city or location of a city. And that will help you also kind of figure out, well, maybe you didn't even know of a certain university, that exists in, for example, Kansas City. And it can really help you, figure out what is most important to you in the as you're looking at different institutions. And then virtual tours right now are huge. It's kind of this exploding part of university websites, especially now that we're all working from home and we're not really having visitors on campus. It means that we've been forced to really move everything we can virtual, which is great for you. So I would say go to YouTube or go to UVisit. Those are two popular places that universities are putting their tours. You could also go to a university website. Some of them host theirs on their own website. So for example, at my institution, we host ours on Google. And so you could go and actually click through the tour on your own and see the different buildings and some facts about each building, which is pretty cool. Next slide, please. So as I said, there's a lot of things that actually go into fit, and you have to start thinking about what is going to be most important to you. Do you want to be in a big city? Do you want to be in a smaller city? There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Do you care about where that city is? Do you prefer to be on a coast? Do you prefer to be in the middle part of the country? Do you care about snow, or do you really want to be in warm weather all year? So start thinking about those things. And if it matters to you, we have a lot of students who come to us who've never seen snow before. They're excited to be able to experience like a true white Christmas, and being able to go sledding and have snowball fights. Value is another important factor. We're going to talk about financial fit a little bit later, but it's also something to start thinking about and talk about with your parents about, what kind of financial fit will you and your family have, but as well, what kind of value are you going to get for your education? I often talk to families about the return on investment when it comes to value, that you are putting in a lot of money and a lot of time. So you want to make sure what you're putting into it, you're going to get out of it when you graduate or go on to a professional or graduate program afterwards. Academics is incredibly important. And as I said, this is kind of the first place a lot of students start. If you know you want to study in a certain program, then maybe start looking for universities that have that program. If you remember the previous slide, I used the example of chemistry. So if you know you want to study chemistry, make sure the schools you're looking at even have that program. Keep in mind when it comes to academics as well, one of the cool things about studying in the US is that you can actually do a lot of mixing and matching of your programs. So maybe you have 2 interests or even 3 interests. You can combine them in a way of doing a double major or a major and a minor. Or you could be crazy like me. I had 2 majors and a minor, and they were all in different fields. My first major was business marketing. My second major was international development. And then I did a minor in South Asian studies because that was the part of the world that I was most interested in. And I'm thankful that I was able to mix and match like that because it's really led me to the career I have today. Housing might be important to you and being able to have on-campus facilities versus trying to find your own housing, before you even come to the US. Some universities will have different policies that maybe your freshman year, you may be required to live on campus. Some universities, you may be required the first 2 or 3 years before you're allowed to move off. So if it matters to you, make sure you're looking at the housing policies. Diversity. We talked about this being one of the top reasons to come to the US. Institutions in the US are incredibly diverse. You will meet people from around the world. So looking at different institutions and what their makeup of their student body is may be something important to you. Maybe you want to study somewhere that has a lot of other students from your home country. Or maybe you want to go somewhere where nobody knows anything about your home country and you're going to be able to really teach them and help them explore your culture, which is a lot of fun. We talked about research as well, especially depending on certain programs you might want to go into. You might really need to be involved in research. So making sure that that institution has those opportunities available for you. And then admissions requirements, of course, are going to be a big thing when you get to the point of having your narrowed list and starting to really apply and making sure that you have all the necessary materials to actually complete your application and be admitted to, some of these schools. And we'll talk about the admissions requirements in depth in just a few minutes. We could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the big things when we talk about fit that a lot of students, kind of forget to think about sometimes is the financial fit and understanding scholarships and funding. So a lot of students think, well, I want to go to the US. I know I'm a great student and I want a full scholarship. Honestly, though, full scholarships are very, very difficult to come across. So I would not plan on having a full scholarship. You're likely going to have to pay something to go to university in the US. But there's lots of different types of scholarships and a lot of different types of options that you have. You do have to start thinking and talking with your parents about, what is your budget when it comes to looking at universities? And even for universities that might be outside of your budget, what opportunities do they have for scholarships that can help bring you into your budget? So the first thing that a lot of universities will be merit-based scholarships. These scholarships are generally based on, your academics from high school, or if you're looking at graduate programs, maybe look at your undergraduate degree. A lot of times they'll award these when you are admitted to that university. So you'll know right away what your level of scholarship is and can already start planning ahead for that. Need-based scholarships and financial aid. So this is going to be something where a university is going to likely ask you and your family for different information about how much money do you make or your parents make, how much does your family have in different assets. And based on that, they may be able to give you some need-based scholarships. Talent-based scholarships can come from things like music or acting or different art programs, and are usually very program specific or college specific within a university. Athletic scholarships, which I know everybody hears about all the time, about getting athletic scholarships. These are great, especially if you're going to a Division I or Division II NCAA school in the US, because those could be scholarship based. I will tell you, generally, if you're looking at an athletic scholarship, coaches are going to want to see that you are one of the top players in the country or one of the top players in your division. So be prepared. Basically, they have an athletic resume ready to go. So you can talk to coaches about all of the things that you've accomplished. There is a session later this week that talks specifically about athletic scholarships. So if you are an athlete looking at scholarships, make sure you go to that session. Student loans can be another way to help pay for your education, but of course, a loan is different than a scholarship, that you do have to pay it back later. So make sure that if it's something that you're willing to do, that when we talk about that ROI, that return on investment, that you feel like you're going to be able to, get a job when you graduate, so you're going to be able to pay those loans back. Employment during school is a possibility as well. So on your student visa, you are allowed to work up to 20 hours a week during the school year, then 40 hours a week during your summer break. I do tell students, though, generally plan on your student employment to be able to help you pay for your day-to-day expenses. So like your cell phone, going out to eat, going shopping, things like that. It's generally not going to be enough to pay for your tuition itself. You can do off-campus internships once you have been in the US for at least 12 months, but an internship does have to relate directly to what you're studying. So for example, if you are studying business marketing, then it needs to be a marketing-related internship. You can't be working, at McDonald's per se, and then think that, that'll count as an internship. Co-op programs are very interesting, and they're specialized into different universities, but these could be a way where you actually study for a semester or a year, and then you go work for a semester or a year. It's a really nice way to really combine that classroom education and the hands-on opportunities. And then another way that you can actually help save money in the long run is if you are in programs that have AP courses, or you're an A-level program or an IB, look at each institution's policies on being able to bring in some of those credits. It could mean that you could save a semester or a year of your education, depending on what classes you've taken, what scores you got, and how they come into an institution. So if you're in one of those types of programs, really make sure you're talking to universities about how that can help you in the long run. And then the last thing I'll say about finding fit is a lot of students are saying, well, I know it's important to me, but how do I know if this institution matches what I'm looking for? So make sure you're checking out a university's webpage. There's so much information, you really can get lost there. Sign up for more information. I know for me, when you sign up to get information from Creighton, I send emails all the time that talk about different things that are happening in our programs, different research that's going on campus, even really cool things that are happening in Omaha. You can also sign up to meet with an admissions representative. And right now, like I said, it's great. Everything's virtual. So it's very easy to set an appointment to meet with an admissions counselor and have that one-on-one conversation about what's happening at the university, what kind of programs they have, things like that. You do have to be careful. Some institutions will have a main admissions page and then a special international student admissions page that may have some additional application requirements. So just make sure you're looking at the correct page. We talked a little bit about virtual tours already. So once again, a great way to do it. At my institution, you could also do a virtual tour with a current student. So you're basically having a one-on-one meeting with a current student, and they go through the virtual tour with them, which is a lot of fun because they can tell you like, oh, this is my favorite place to study, or this is my favorite cafeteria to go to, or I know to avoid Starbucks at 10 a.m. because that's when the line's the longest. So things like that, you can already start picking up some of that student experience through it. Connect with anybody on campus, really. It can be, like I said, an admissions counselor or current students. Really don't be shy about reaching out to us. We're all very nice people and we love working with students. So really don't be shy and take a chance on just sending us an email. It might take us more than 24 hours to get back to you, but we will get back to you and we do want to get to know you better. And then another great place is university social media pages. This could be a fun way to figure out what kind of activities are happening on campus, maybe what kind of concerts, what kind of sporting events, things like that that are going on, and start saying, you know, can I see myself in these pictures? Can I see myself having fun with the rest of these students? Those would be my tips about seeing if you can find fit. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy to start talking a little bit about the application process and what that could look like for you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And so we talked a lot about some of the different features of finding a right fit: location and academic interest, as well as a whole bunch of other factors that you would really start to take a look at, and what we sort of call, you know, a self-reflection. Who are you, and what do you want out of your college experience? And as you are looking at the things in terms of finding a right fit, your academic interests are obviously going to be one of the major factors of what you're doing. And in that self-reflection, I always like to take a look at the academic interest to your career goals, to also include the subjects that you are good at. And so in a perfect example, going, you know, way back a lot of years, I had an academic interest in psychology. I thought I wanted to be a counselor, which I am. But in my mind, when I was much younger, I thought I was going to be a psychologist. And I realized that many psychologists, well, nowadays go into a lot of different fields. To be a doctor of psychology, you're going to go to medical school. And that was not at all something that was my career goal or was the subject that I was good at. So I was really adapting to what I decided to do, and obviously counsel people in a very different way, and counsel students in helping find the right fit and the admissions process. But the subjects you are good at, I think Tim and Megan and all admissions counselors and school counselors out there will talk about the subjects you are good at. And if math is not your strong suit per se, then a major in math or something that's heavy core in math courses is probably not a direction you want to go to. So that self-reflection of what am I interested in doing? Does that match the career goal that I want? And am I good in those subjects where it's going to be a great fit? When you're doing these self-reflections and looking at the schools in terms of location and diversity and housing, and has the academic interest, then you're going to look at the academic qualifications and your professional qualifications that you have. So each school will have admissions requirements. A lot of times on their website, as we talked about, making sure you really dive deep and explore those websites, they're going to list the average a student might have to get admitted to that institution. So you could probably be a little under, you can definitely be above those averages. And so you're wanting to, make a best guess in terms of, is this going to be a good place for me to apply to that I would get admitted? For most international students, depending on where you're from, and I know we have students from really all over the globe right now joining us, and not just sort of Oceania, but I know we've offered this to a lot of students. So those that are not in English-speaking countries, most of them will require an English proficiency exam to come in as an international student. And then the last bit of self-reflection is your involvement. Things like activities, clubs, community service. Not only am I being involved in them at the high school level, but is this something that I want to continue in university life, and do they offer that? So when you're looking at all of these things, it's a perfect time to reflect on what's involved. And I do want to say that as we move forward, and I'm going to talk about this probably in the next slide or two, and as we move forward on the undergraduate level to a more test optional environment here in the US, because so many tests have been canceled, that the involvement is going to play more of a part. And I know that that's harder sometimes for international students when particular schools do not have as much opportunities for activities and clubs like we would here in the US. But I do know that most of the schools in the US have moved a lot of these involvement activities virtual. And what's going to want to make you stand out in terms of an applicant is figuring out how you take all of these academic interests and professional qualifications and involvement that you can and that's available to you. And so we don't expect you to necessarily be involved in everything, but things that are of availability to you. So we made here a timeline. We did touch upon a little bit. We do know we have both undergraduate and graduate interest here. This is primarily for an undergraduate student who's looking to apply to college within a typical year. Graduate timeline would definitely be different, and if we do have some questions out there, we're happy to talk about that. But in your spring of your year 11, called your junior year here in the US, you're going to want to do sort of what we're doing right now, starting the college search, making lists. I really encourage an Excel spreadsheet. You can have a couple of tabs, but you'll definitely want to list some of the features we were talking about in terms of your interests. So again, is location important to you? Is suburban versus city-like versus rural important to you? Location, is temperature important to you? And then you're going to want to list all of those schools and kind of make lists. And then once you apply, you probably will want another tab to keep track of that. In your spring of your year 11, typically you would take exams. For those of you who were not able to right now because things were canceled, we get that, which is why, as I mentioned, a lot of schools are going test optional for spring 2021, fall 2021, and even beyond that at this point. So for those of you who are just going into year 12, you probably don't have much to worry, but if I have some of those who are younger, those are things at the end of your year 11 you might want to start thinking about. In the summer, going into year 12, you're going to want to do some college visits. Again, this year is a different year. While we do know that some schools are doing college visits, depending on what part of the US you are, and you probably can't even get a flight here to the US at this point, or might not want to visit. But we are doing so many virtual tours and appointments, as my colleagues have said, and there's so many ways to find them. So go on our websites, go really just through Google. There's a great site called UVisit, which has hundreds of different schools' virtual tours, and all of us are doing virtual one-on-one appointments. And we really encourage you to connect with a school counselor and an admissions counselor and start the process. And then really August of going into year 12, so that's the very beginning of your last year of school, of high school, you're going to want to complete your list of schools that you're going to apply to. You are going to want to write your essay for your application, and you're going to request letters of reference. And I always recommend, for your list of schools, most school counselors will tell you no more than 10, which is probably a good number, but that's something that you and your school counselor or your EducationUSA counselor can talk about. I would say probably the average is under that. Write your essay. You're going to want to write your essay and then have a few people read it over. EducationUSA advisors will definitely do this. If you have an English teacher or a teacher that you trust to read it, they're really going to want to check for any grammatical and spelling errors, as well as making sure that your story is being told. And some schools will have different essay topics. The Common Application, which is a fairly fairly wide used application system throughout many schools in the US. Will have a couple of different topics you can choose from, but typically a school is looking for a short way of getting to know you a little better. And anything that you can say in there where you can say, this is why I belong at this school, is really what a school is looking for. And then request letters of reference. Some schools will have one letter of reference, some might have two, some might request directly from specific departments, depending on what major you're applying to, or if you're applying to any kind of honors programs. Those letters and the essay will obviously all need to be in English, especially if I'm talking to anyone outside of an English-speaking country. The letters you're going to want to request from someone who can speak highly of your academic achievements, unless it's specific to asking about other achievements. So, you don't want your mom to write those letters, or someone, maybe, someone who knew you 5-6 years ago. They can't necessarily speak to your academic ability right now. So typically someone within the past 2 years who can talk about your academic ability. Typically by December of year 12, you're going to submit that application. Most schools will extend beyond that. Highly competitive and selective schools will have a deadline close to January 1st. If you're applying early decision, early action, we didn't really talk much about that, but we're happy to answer questions specifically on that. Those will have earlier deadlines, typically a November 1 or December 1. And again, you'd have to look specifically at each school's requirements. And then April, May of year 12, you're going to receive that admissions decision, and on May 1, make a decision on where to attend. And I sort of just talked about this, but I will mention again, as we mentioned, there's over 4,000 universities in the US, and each one of them is going to have a different timeline, different admissions criteria, different application process. So it's really important in that college search to know all of the different deadlines and processes. So even if Stony Brook is a state institution, we belong to a network of over 60 campuses in New York State. Each one of us have a different application process and admissions criteria. So it's really important to contact each school and to know all of that. So we've sort of done the search process, and you are narrowing down all of your selection and are hopefully finding the right fit. And you're possibly ready to apply and see if it's the right fit. So we've talked a lot about making sure that you speak to an admissions counselor, and it's so important. We are here for you. This is our job. EducationUSA, this is their job. We are the resources to be using. So one of the things that irks me the most is I'll get a phone call and it says, well, my friend said that you could do this at Stony Brook or wherever else I used to work. And it's like, well, if you didn't talk to me specifically, you could have called me, you could have emailed me. And now, like I said, so many of us are doing virtual one-on-one visits. We're doing it through Google Meets, through Zoom, through lots of other ways. So just feel free to call us or connect with us anytime. As I mentioned before, there are a couple of different application types. So many schools will have their own application. Probably not so many paper anymore, but some do, versus an online application. We also have what's known as the common application or the coalition application, which is sort of this universal application that many schools in the US accept. But again, this is important where you're going to each school that you want to apply and seeing all of the details on how you need to apply, what the deadline is, what you need to submit in terms of below, like essay and personal statements, letters of reference in English. Do we need one or two? Your academic records. Some schools will require a WES evaluation, where you have to have your transcripts evaluated by an organization called the World Education Service, where they're going to take that that transcript, that academic record, and say, yes, you have all of these specific courses, and this is what it's equivalent to, either a U.S. high school diploma. In particular, a lot of, and I skipped over the second part of the second bullet for graduate and professional application systems. So a lot of graduate and professional application programs will have either their own application, or many of the professional organizations will have their own professional application here in the US. A lot of our health professions and medical school, you have to fill out the national exam just to get into medical school or physician's assistant. And the beauty of those applications is that you fill out one application and it will send to all of the schools that you want to. But graduate and professional level programs will often require a WES evaluation if you have attended university outside of the US, and that will do what's called a credit by credit evaluation of your courses and let schools know that you have equivalent to a US bachelor's degree. But each school is different on what they require and how they will require academic records. So I talked about, my love of Excel spreadsheets in this way. And so when you pick all of the schools you want to apply, typically I put different columns of deadlines and what their requirements are to keep everything straight. I also, just as a hint on an offshoot, I put in portal passwords, because everyone will have an application system portal to check the status of your application. So I'll put in all the usernames and passwords in that Excel sheet as well. And then I mentioned a few times English proficiency. I talked a little bit before about test optional. Many schools in the US are going test optional. And what does that really mean? A lot of times for international students who do not come from English speaking countries, test optional still means that they need to submit an English proficiency exam, but they wouldn't need to submit an SAT or ACT for admission. Many of the English proficiency exams have gone online, like TOEFL and IELTS and Duolingo. Each school will have different requirements as to what exam they accept, as well as what the minimum score is. To go back to test optional in terms of what that means is that students will not need to submit an ACT or SAT exam. Each school, again, test optional program will be different. The things that you'll want to check out is that for all majors. Some majors will and might still require that for admission to very highly selective majors. That it typically many majors are based on SAT, or honors programs admissions can be based on. So each school is going to have a different policy on what their test optional policy is going to look like. So you really want to go to those schools and ask, can I get into the major that I'm looking at? Will I still be eligible for any scholarships without an SAT or ACT? If I'm looking for specific programs within the university, can I still be test optional? So those are definitely questions you're going to want to ask when you move on. We know one of the other factors when looking at a right fit for a school is safety. So you've kind of applied and know that you have all of these features, and safety is really a big component at all US institutions. And it is something that is extremely important to just every person I know that works at a university. A few years ago, there was a national campaign here in the US called the You Are Welcome Here campaign. It started at Temple University after our current president was elected, and there was some limitations and restrictions on the visa program for students from certain countries. And we collectively, as hundreds of universities came together and campaigned that students are welcome on our campuses. And we are going to continue to send the message that US higher education institutions want international students here and are going to continue to welcome international students on our campuses. So that's certainly for one. And that is an excellent campaign where students can receive a scholarship from the You Are Welcome Here campaign at each individual institution. USA website. Other, but certainly once we get to actual campus, we want to, of course, ensure your safety, some kind of police or campus security. For and report to your location. One of the big things that most campuses will have is a buddy escort system. And I always say that is that I need to, so my friend with the by myself to walk back to my dorm. Really safe. It's never a good idea to walk alone. And there are typically groups on campus that will support through the campus police and a student campus. Also, most campuses will have GPS app. Sort of, maybe it's dark or it's far and you just want sort of some extra security. I know at Stony Brook, our GPS app is you basically say, okay, I'm leaving the library now. I'm heading to my dorm. You clock in to say that you're at your dorm. If you don't, campus police will come and track you and locate you. Another amazing safety feature is that most buildings are only accessible by ID. And depending on the building, if you don't belong in that building, even though you're a student or a staff member on campus, you still can't get in. And in particular now, even with the pandemic, because of the fact that we need to be less populated and be in density control, this is going to increase even more. So as it is, most students who can't get into dorms unless they are in that quad. You can't get into labs unless you're taking those courses. But we're already, I know at Stony Brook, preparing for building access by ID to very specific buildings just because of density issues, not even safety. And then there's blue lights on campus. These are basically emergency telephones all throughout campus, where if ever you're walking and need to get in touch with someone in an emergency, they are all over there. So I know we're sort of running out of time, and we want to make sure we're getting all your questions. So we just also thought we'd give a couple of COVID updates, just because we know a lot of students are curious. They might have forever thought, I'm going to apply to the US, and now maybe not, or I don't know what's going on, and I don't know, should I not, and what should I do? So just a few things. Adjusting to online learning. You've probably had to do this in the past few months as you had been in school. There's we've all had to adjust, and many schools will be online for the fall, a hybrid situation for the fall. We know many high schools will be in that same situation. And no matter what that situation is, we are here to help you walk through it and get you through it. Adjusted grading system. Many of your high schools and or colleges have gone pass-fail, have had final exams and national exams canceled. We totally understand that. And I don't know of any US institution that is not totally okay with that that adjusted grading system. And whatever your school has decided to do, we're working within that. And so we constantly connect with school counselors and your Education USA advisors to say, like, okay, this is what you did for the year, and sort of take it with each school. I talked before about testing and exam issues and changes. And again, most schools are going test optional. Most schools are taking online TOEFL, Duolingo if you need to have English proficiency. Online student support services, tremendous amount of online support. Schools are doing lots of virtual events. And in particular, Education USA doing this whole week. We're just the start of some amazing programs throughout the week. Student employment system assistance. Students are still working. We're allowing students to work remotely. We're figuring out how they can still continue their work and employment through campus. So there's, I always say, just because classes went online doesn't mean that everything else has stopped. In the university world, activities have stayed online, employment has stayed online, or in these hybrid situations, and we're making it work for everything. Not only nationwide, but institution-wide, there's been emergency grants and funding for students and families who have been impacted by COVID and who perhaps need some financial assistance. There's also a lot of food banks and emergency assistance program happening in all of our universities. So I can give an example. At Stony Brook, we had 1,300 students still stay on campus and needed to obviously still have food, which they did. But we had students who were off campus as well. So those students who were off campus living in our communities who couldn't get home to different countries needed to use perhaps some of that emergency assistance. So we as a collective, multiple universities are here to help. So we're going to quickly go through a little bit about each institution as well. Since I still have the floor, I'm going to quickly talk. I've mentioned a little bit before, Stony Brook University. We are a top research university located in New York. We are about 60 miles east of Manhattan, about 26,000 students, 4,000 international students, undergraduate and graduate PhD level programs, over 200 programs, things like arts and sciences, so your humanities, your basic sciences, physics, biology, math, engineering, so computer science, civil engineering, electrical engineering, business administration. We also have a School of Marine and Atmospheric Science, so things like sustainability, climate control, coastal water changes, things like, and marine sciences and things like that. And we also have a School of Journalism. I could talk for a long time, but I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to just pass it on to Megan.
Hey again, everybody. So Creighton University is located in Omaha, Nebraska. So we are right in the middle of the U.S. We are a private university with 3 colleges and about 140 different academic programs. Total on campus, we have just under 9,000 students who come from all 50 states of the U.S. and about 50 countries. We are the number 104 ranked private school in the U.S. So within the U.S., especially the Midwest part of the U.S., which is the region that we're located in, we're very well known. And really for that, we're well known for 2 different areas of study. One is our sciences, especially related to healthcare. So we do have, on the undergraduate level, we are ranked in the top 40 schools for our undergraduate research. And then we do have medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician's assistant, health administration, and nursing programs. So almost anything you want to do in healthcare, you can do on our campus. Then we're also really well known for our College of Business. Many of our programs are ranked in the top 25 in the U.S. Omaha is actually the #1 city in the world for Fortune 500 companies. And a lot of our students get some pretty awesome internships with those companies. We're also the only university in the world with a completely student-run Apple store on our campus. So as a student, you could actually run your entire own Apple store before you graduate from college. And we'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Megan. College of the Canyons is located in Southern California, a community college, and I think the message for you to take away is a great way to start your academic career. If you start at a community college, you can transfer to anywhere else in the country. And one of the benefits that College of the Canyons has, and this is shared with a lot of community colleges, is that we've simplified a lot of the processes that typically happen at the beginning of your career in the United States in academia. The application is very simple. There's no grade reviews. The costs are extremely low. So all of these things are because the mission of the community college system is access. It's to get as many people into the chance to transfer as possible. If you choose the right community college, you're going to have a very high rate of transfer. And so when you're researching community colleges, ask about that transfer rate. Ask about what schools are associated with the system that you're applying to. Now, College of the Canyons can transfer anywhere in the United States, but they have a focus on California. So if you're looking at Berkeley or UCLA or any of the 23 California state universities or the private schools, we have access to all those in California, and it's what we specialize in. But really the message is, from all three of us, is don't not study. A lot of the COVID problems and political problems that are existing right now seem like deterrents, but there's many schools that have online programs where you start online and then you shift to on campus. So for me, for example, at College of the Canyons, we have a 1+1+2. So 1 year you study in your home country. 1 year you study face-to-face with me, and then 2 years you study at the school that you transfer to. And all of this is a seamless process. So don't not study. Continue working towards your bachelor's degree. Get that degree and even an advanced degree. It's the key to the success for your career and actually will lead to a happy life. Thank you, everybody. And I think now we'll turn it back over to Catherine and taking of questions.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. This is incredible information. And we have so many questions that have populated through. And if you are still live with us and you have some questions, please feel free to visit our Slido page. The link should still be there at the bottom of your screen. So the first question is a pretty important one. So if you tuned in a little late and you're worried that you missed some important information, have no fear. The recording will be available after this session today. So please watch out on our Facebook pages to access this content in the future. So we have another very popular question, and we kind of started talking about this a little bit earlier on, but it's in terms of applications. And keep in mind too that we will be delving pretty deep into all things applications this week on Thursday. It's actually a two-part session, so we'll delve really deep on that one. But how many schools should you be applying to? And really this comes down to you and your family and what works best for you. But our typical rule of thumb at Education USA is you want to be considering about 4 to 6 different institutions to be applying to. So don't put all of your eggs in one basket. This can be a mix of US institutions, institutions in your home country, and definitely in a range of selectivity as well, so that you are maximizing your options and seeing what's going to work best for you. Anyone else want to chime in on that response?
Yeah, I'd like to. Something to remember for students is there's a lot of worry about, are you going to be accepted? And so I always encourage students to apply to a community college like College of the Canyons. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You may not go, and that's fine, but there's almost never a charge for applying to College of the Canyons. The process is really simple for community colleges. And if it turns out that in the 6 institutions that you applied to, you don't get accepted for some reason, you can always come to a community college and then later transfer to that university as a junior because you've proven yourself. So remember, community college is always sort of that back pocket place. You want to apply get your application done, and then focus on your other 5 schools that you really, really want to go to.
Great. So our next question is about submitting academic records. And please keep in mind, we'll talk about this much more in depth on Thursday this week. But the question is, are you able to choose what report cards you send to the institution? And I'll just address that really quickly right now. And the long story short is that institutions typically want to see your whole results from the last 4 years, sometimes even 5, especially if you're a student athlete coming from New Zealand in particular. But keep in mind, they're looking for, most of the time, official results. There are some institutions who are taking self-reported results nowadays as well. So I'm going to pause that question and we will readdress that on Thursday. So the next question is, what are some of the ways to make a big campus feel small? And I know that we have a similar question about making a small campus feel big and buzzy as well. So I'm going to throw that over to our presenters here.
Sure. I'll take sort of the big campus and how to make that feel small. At Stony Brook University, as I mentioned, is 25,000 students, over 4,000 international students. We're over 1,000 acres. The way that we make it small is all freshman students begin in what's called a living and learning community. And you might hear that buzzword a little bit as you're starting to go through the college search process. And we separate our living and learning communities into 6 different, what we call undergraduate colleges. They have nothing to do with your major, but they are academic theme-based, where you pick a topic that sort of speaks to you out of the 6 that we have, and you will live in the same community in a number of different residence halls with the same people in that community, and have a class and have 2 classes in your first year together, and do a lot of activities together throughout that year. And so we really sort of make a larger community feel small. There are also a number of other ways that in terms of, even though some large universities will have large classes, there's still a lot of small classes, and many classes will require small classes. And certainly now, as we move into the fall semester, many universities are just no longer going to be having large classes, and they'll have some sort of hybrid model for those large classes just to keep density down. But there are also, clubs and organizations and ways to get involved, advisors to speak with on how to really, you will find a small community. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on how to make a small campus feel big. I'm happy to do so as well. I've also worked at small schools.
I can talk about that one a little bit. So I actually went to a university that had only about 3,500 students. So it was a pretty small university. And I was worried that it was going to be too small and I was going to get maybe kind of bored in some ways. So what I did, the biggest piece of advice I have for students, is to get involved. This will help you meet people who are outside of your program and outside of your majors. And, you get to meet other people across campus, both students and staff and faculty, but also getting involved in the community. There were a lot of volunteer projects that I worked on that involved the city I was living in. And it was a great way to get to know more about the city that the university was in, but also feel like it opened up kind of this whole other world for me. And it really had an impact in terms of what I wanted to do after I graduated, and having that networking ability both on campus and off campus.
Great. Thank you. That I feel like we covered all bases with that one. So we have some questions about direct relationships, both with Education USA advisors and with international counselors at institutions. And so the first question, is it free to talk to any of us? And from the EducationUSA perspective, absolutely. We are always free and an official service provided by the US Department of State. So always feel free to get in touch with us and ask questions. You'll see that through each of the Facebook pages that you're watching from, there's information for you to connect directly with an EducationUSA advisor, and I will give you some more information on that a little further on. Anyone want to chime in about contacting you all directly in the future? Is there any fee to consider?
There is absolutely no fee to contact any admissions counselor in the U.S. working at any U.S. College or university, undergraduate, graduate, etc. That we are employed to do that, to speak to you on questions. I think Megan mentioned before, if you email us, sometimes we might not get back, right away within 24 hours, but we are highly responsive, and it is our job to counsel you on what the university offers, what the admissions criteria are, what would make you a standout student, and the only fees you would eventually pay are your tuition fees if you are admitted to the university and are going to come. But our advice is free whether you come or not. So we encourage you. And one of the amazing things about the relationship between universities and Education USA is just that relationship. Is you start working with Katie, and all of a sudden, they're applying to Stony Brook, and she might shoot me an email and say, "Hey, I've been working with this student. Just wanted to give you a heads up." And there will be an even broader counseling session between all of us. So it's really an amazing asset that we highly, highly, highly encourage to utilize.
Great. So we are running over time, but I do want to get to a couple of more questions. And for those of you who are submitting questions, we will respond to them on the Facebook pages for Education USA in Australia and New Zealand. But this next question is, how important are the rankings of the university when applying as an international student? Anyone want to have a go?
I'll give it a start because I think that I have an interesting perspective on that. So I think that the school that you complete your degree at is very important. Employers do care. And so not only is the access to future career improved, but also there is some evidence that possibly there's some advantages academically, but that diploma does matter. So what matters even more though than the ranking of the school is the ranking of the program. So think about what you want to study and find schools that match that, rather than start it at a high ranking school and try to figure out what major you can figure out that goes there. And I'm speaking on behalf of community colleges in the United States. And so I'll add that the community college that you start at doesn't need to be ranked. There's no need for that. You need to know that school has access to the programs that you want to study, and that you're going to have a lot of choices for what those programs are in the future. So that's kind of the way to look at rankings.
So I will add to that a little bit, and I know that ranking is so important to so many people in terms of perception. And certainly name recognition goes a long way in terms of employers. But I really, really encourage students in terms of finding their right fit is two things. One, outside of ranking, is go somewhere where you're going to be sort of a shining star. So, everyone wants to go to a top tier, top name university. Not everyone can get in. Not everyone can perform well there. don't go to a university where you're going to constantly struggle because you're not being the best you that you can be. And really, beyond rankings, I like to say is wherever you choose, it's what you do while you're in school with that degree. So you're going to go for a job a job interview, and you're going to have a degree in whatever that major is, along with 3 other people from 3 other different universities with perhaps the same major and the same GPA. But what are the experiences you had while you were at the university you've attended? What did you do? What did you learn in those classes? Did you do co-op programs and internships that we kind of, very little bit touched upon, but I'm sure you're about to dive in deep into a week of more information on U.S. colleges. Did you take part in research? Did you learn? Did you mentor with faculty? What are the things you really got involved with that major experience that you're going to be able to talk about in a job interview? In a job interview, you can talk about the school you went to, but you're not, are you going to be able to talk about how you're qualified for that position that you're applying to? And the only way to do that is from the experiences you've learned with wherever you're going. You could go to the best school and not do anything but study and get good grades. But if you didn't take part in any other learning opportunities in terms of getting yourself ready for work, you're not preparing yourself. So it's really what you do with your time while you're in college that I really think is so important beyond rankings.
Absolutely. Thank you all for responding to that. I think we're going to wrap up our Q&A as of now, just because we are over time. However, if you submitted a question, you better be sure that we are going to respond to that. And we are going to put those answers through the Education USA Facebook pages for New Zealand and Australia. There is one more note I wanted to make, and that is in regards to the timeline that we were talking about a little bit earlier. So one of the questions was, do you have a timeline for Australia? And what we were talking about as part of this presentation was actually based off of a 12-year school experience. So that timeline was applicable to Australia. From New Zealand, where I am, we have 13 years of school typically. So we're talking about that timeline would be slightly different. And feel free to get in touch with us. Both Education USA, New Zealand, and Australia actually have really good resources for you about specific timelines, so we can have that information for you available. I wanted to just thank you all so much for tuning in to this session on Research Your Options as part of Education USA Virtual Week. This is just the beginning of a full week of lots of information coming ahead. And with that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's next. So tomorrow, that's Tuesday, we are going to be talking in depth about liberal arts education, STEM programs, and arts programs. Then on Wednesday, we have Financing Your Studies, a whole hour of that, followed by sports scholarships. Thursday this week, we have a 2-part series on completing your application and everything you could possibly want to know about that. Then on Friday, we're talking about successful transitions to campus, followed by a live Q&A with Education USA advisors in Australia and New Zealand. So that rounds up the week. If you have questions about the timing of these events too, please know that they start at 12 o'clock New Zealand Standard Time each day. So I wanted to thank you, a special thanks to our U.S. admissions experts, Stacy, Tim, and Megan, for sharing your expertise with all of us today. If you would like to follow along for more of these sessions throughout the week, please use our hashtag, which is #EduSAVirtualWeek. That will loop you into much more content about institutions that are participating and some other resources as follow-up as well. So please check out our other EduUSA Virtual Week sessions by visiting bit.ly/EduUSA Virtual Week Live and register online via the link available on our Facebook events pages for additional resources and ongoing support from Education USA. If you have any future questions, please feel free to get in touch with your local Education USA Center, and that's at www.educationusa.state.gov. So thanks again. We wish you well, and we hope to catch you later this week.